My name is Evelyn Ross, and I am 62 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed I understood the quiet rhythms of responsibility, the soft predictability of mornings, the comfort of a house arranged by loving hands, and the notion that goodness, steady, honest goodness, would protect a person from the more treacherous corners of life. I wasn't naive. I had lived through lean years, lost friends to time and misfortune, and survived my fair share of personal storms. But nothing had quite prepared me for the peculiar betrayal that would unfold after my husband passed away. I had been married to Daniel for 36 years. He was a mechanic with an easy smile, a man of discipline and habit, who loved order almost as much as he loved family. His family, my in-laws, were a complicated bunch. Respectable to anyone looking from the outside, but intertwined with small, unspoken resentments and a kind of subtle opportunism that revealed itself only in moments when someone else had something they wanted. I kept my distance from their drama. They were Daniel's people, not mine, and although they were never outwardly cruel, they carried an air of entitlement that made me keep a polite boundary. When Daniel became sick, unexpectedly, aggressively, devastatingly, I found myself dealing with more paperwork, more decisions, and more lonely nights than I had ever imagined. He left behind medical bills that towered over me like a physical weight, and the emotional bite of losing a life companion gnawed at me in ways I didn't express aloud. But amid the grief, one thing kept me afloat. Daniel had worked at a factory that later faced a major lawsuit for unsafe chemical exposure. A settlement had finally been approved, $210,000. It wouldn't erase the pain or the years of treatment, but it would save me from drowning under the debts he never should have had in the first place. Of course, I knew money had a strange way of attracting people who had ignored you for years. Still, I never expected the audacity of what came next. The day after I quietly filed the compensation paperwork, I received a phone call from Daniel's sister, Loretta. She hadn't spoken to me in almost a year. Her tone was suddenly warm, too warm, like honey poured hastily over something rotten. "Evie," she said, "we've been thinking of you so much since Danny passed. We want to make sure the family gets what's owed." I paused. The phrasing was deliberate, calculated, and entirely wrong. "What do you mean by the family?" I asked. There was a small inhale, a rustle, as if she was rearranging the version of herself she wished to present. "Well," she said, "since the compensation was connected to Danny's health, it only makes sense that his blood relatives have a say in how it's allocated." I didn't respond immediately. My heart didn't race, but something in me quietly hardened. It was the first clue that the peace I thought I was settling into after Daniel's passing was about to crack open into something far darker. I had filed everything under my maiden name, Ross, on the advice of the attorney handling the settlement. It was cleaner, legally. But I hadn't told a soul. Or so I believed. I had the strange feeling that the next few weeks would reveal more than grief and money. They would uncover intentions that had sat dormant in my in-laws for years, waiting for a moment like this. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that they were about to make that moment theirs. Until I made sure it became mine instead. And silently, I promised myself, if they wanted a battle over truth, I would give them one. Loretta's call wasn't the end of it. In fact, it was merely the opening act. 3 days later, while I was sorting through Daniel's old tools in the garage, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, I found not one but 3 of my in-laws standing on my porch. Loretta, her younger brother Neil, and their mother Eleanor. Eleanor, at 83, still carried herself with the stiff-backed pride of a Victorian actress. She dressed in muted shades of navy and gray, always immaculate, always judging. Her eyes swept the entryway like she was taking inventory of everything I had no right to possess. "Evelyn," she said with that tight-lipped smile she used when she wanted something. "We'd like to discuss Daniel's estate." "Estate," I repeated. "There isn't much of one." "We know about the settlement," Neil said. The casual bluntness of his voice made my stomach clench, not because of the information itself, but because he delivered it the way someone might lean down to examine a shiny coin they planned to pocket. "I'm not sure what you think you know, I replied, leaning against the doorway. That Danny qualified for a substantial payout, Loretta chimed in. And since we're his family, we expect transparency. I wanted to laugh, not out of amusement, but because of the sheer absurdity. Daniel had been estranged from them for years. Holidays passed with no visits, no calls. They showed up after he died, at the funeral, dry-eyed and looking more inconvenienced than heartbroken. What exactly do you think you're entitled to? I asked calmly. To a portion, Eleanor said. It's only fair. Their arrogance was so pronounced, so practiced, that for a moment I found myself admiring their commitment to delusion. Then I saw something that chilled me more than their words. Neil pulled a document from his coat pocket. We've already contacted the settlement office, he said. They told us no claim had been filed under Daniel's name yet. So we'll be submitting one on his behalf. And since you seem overwhelmed, we'll take care of the process. My heart gave a single, heavy thud. So that was their plan. Claim the money themselves. File before I could. Rewrite history and place themselves as the grieving, deserving family. The audacity was staggering. The cruelty was expected. I let them speak. I let them outline their scheme, moving in unison, emboldened by each other, confident they had caught me unprepared. Neil ended with, "We know you haven't filed yet. So we'd like you to sign this form giving the family joint authority." He offered me a pen. And that was the moment I understood the depth of their betrayal, not because of the money, but because Daniel, in all his kindness, had believed his family had goodness left in them. But I saw now that they would have gutted him financially if he was still alive. I didn't say anything. I simply stepped back, closed the door, and locked it with a soft click. Behind it, I heard Eleanor gasp. "She can't do that," Loretta hissed. Oh, but I already had. And they were about to learn exactly how thoroughly. To understand why my in-laws behaved the way they did, you'd need to understand the history behind them. The kind Daniel rarely spoke about unless the night was late and the lights were dim. Daniel came from a family built on appearances. His mother believed respectability was something you wore like a brooch, something that needed constant polishing. His father chased status through business ventures that failed as often as they began. Money, for them, was never a means to stability. It was a symbol of superiority. And entitlement ran in their blood the way humility ran in mine. Daniel was different. He'd escaped the family hunger for social validation by embracing honest work. He built engines, repaired damaged parts, and saved quietly for emergencies rather than luxuries. He didn't measure worth through wealth. He measured it through reliability. But that difference cost him something. His family dismissed him. They treated him like a disappointment, the child who aimed too low. They only called when they wanted something. And every time, Daniel gave it. Money, help, time, labor, because he loved them more than they loved him. In the 40 years I knew that family, I watched them borrow money they never repaid. I watched them forget birthdays until they needed a favor. I watched them take advantage of Daniel's generosity and call it family obligation. He never complained, but he grew quieter each time. Quieter and more resigned. When he became ill, I asked him why he didn't distance himself fully. "They're still my family," he said softly. "And one day they'll need help for something real. Maybe then they'll understand what matters." But the only thing they understood was opportunity. When Daniel passed, they sent flowers, cheap ones, and a 3-sentence card. No hospital visits. No food. No support. So when the lawsuit finally landed, they saw their golden goose had died. But not before leaving behind a potentially valuable egg. And because entitlement was their mother tongue, they convinced themselves I had no real claim. After all, in their minds, I wasn't blood. They underestimated one crucial thing, though. I was the one who knew every detail of the lawsuit. I was the one who sat with Daniel through every treatment. I was the one who handled the attorney, the medical records, and the paperwork. And I was the one who filed the settlement claim 10 days before they marched onto my porch. Under my maiden name, as legally advised. But paranoia, which they mistook for intuition, led them to believe they were moving ahead of me. They didn't know the difference between appearing wise and being wise. And unfortunately for them, I wasn't the quiet widow they imagined they could push aside. I was tired grieving, and far too old to let parasites siphon the last dignified thing Daniel left behind. Which meant it was time to protect what he entrusted to me. Not with rage. Not with insults. But with meticulous, flawless precision. I knew I needed to gather evidence, not only to protect myself, but to ensure that if my in-laws escalated their attempt to steal the settlement, every step of their deception was documented. My first call was to the attorney, Mr. Collins, a patient man who had guided us through the original lawsuit. When I explained the situation, he sighed with the steady calm of someone who had seen such greed before. They have no legal standing, he assured me. The settlement is exclusively for Daniel's legal dependents or next of kin. That's you. But people like this love to cause noise. Document everything. So I did. I saved the voicemail from Loretta, where she said, "We expect a portion of what's owed." I recorded the time and date of their visit. I photographed Neil waving the unauthorized claim form through the window before I closed the door. Then I turned to the settlement office's online portal, where my claim, filed under Evelyn Ross, was visibly marked as under review. I printed every page. I didn't need to expose my maiden name strategy yet. That detail was my quiet advantage. What I didn't expect, however, was how far my in-laws would go. 3 days later, the settlement office called. "Mrs. Williams," the representative began, using my married name as most people still did, "we've had some confusion. We received 2 inquiries today about a pending claim under your husband's name." My stomach tightened. Inquiries from whom? A woman claiming to be his sister and a man claiming to be his next of kin. They said you were mentally unwell after your husband's death and that they should be allowed to act on his behalf. I felt the blood drain from my face. Not because I feared their words, but because of the profound cruelty behind them. They were trying to paint me incompetent, possibly even unfit. The representative continued gently. We told them we could not confirm any information and advised them to seek legal clarification. But we thought you should know. I thanked her and hung up. For the first time, a small tremor of anger rippled through me. Not heated, not reckless, but controlled, cold and clarifying. Calling me overwhelmed was one thing. Calling me mentally unwell was another. They were trying to displace me, rewrite me, erase my authority. But they forgot something fundamental. I had a lifetime's worth of patience, but only for those who deserved it. For leeches, I had something much stronger. I spent the next day collecting everything. Emails, documents, printed confirmations, medical records showing I was Daniel's sole primary caregiver, our marriage certificate, my filing receipt. Then I uncovered something even more damning. While sorting through Daniel's old paperwork, I found the envelope he kept for anything requiring absolute protection, our wills. Beautifully simple, handwritten, notarized. And every last line unequivocally stated, "All legal and financial matters shall be entrusted solely to my wife, Evelyn Ross Williams." Not his siblings. Not his mother. Not his opportunistic relatives. Me. That was the moment I knew my revenge didn't need fire or fury. Truth was enough. The truth, when revealed in full light, could slice sharper than any blade. And I was ready to unsheath it. My in-laws escalated things far faster than I expected. I received a letter, an actual physical letter, from a lawyer representing them. It was full of bluster and hollow threats, claiming they had serious concerns about my ability to manage substantial financial matters, and were prepared to pursue legal intervention to obtain control of their rightful portion of the settlement. I read it once, then again. And then I gently folded it and placed it into a folder labeled Evidence. Their lawyer was likely operating on whatever story they had fed him. Stories about instability, grief, mental decline. Stories crafted to make me appear fragile and incapable. But their narrative had a fatal flaw. Their lawyer addressed the claim by Daniel's last name. Not mine. Not the one on the actual settlement paperwork. My in-laws were trying to seize control of a claim that, to the system, didn't even exist under the identity they were chasing. And the settlement office would soon notify all parties of an update. My claim was nearing approval. The next event unfolded like a carefully set stage scene. The settlement office scheduled a verification call, standard procedure, once a claim passed review. I attended it with Mr. Collins on speakerphone. At the end, the representative said, "We will soon be sending the final confirmation letter for claimant, Evelyn Ross." Exactly as planned. And I knew, instinctively, that my in-laws would receive their startling revelation within days, when their inquiry returned empty once more. But fate delivered the moment sooner and far more theatrically. Loretta called me in a breathless rage. "You sneaky witch. What have you done?" I set the phone on speaker and calmly continued folding laundry. "What seems to be the issue, Loretta? Don't play dumb. We were told someone filed a claim already. Someone named Ross." I let silence settle between us like a measured breath. And we know it's you," she spat. "We know you're hiding money and trying to keep us out of the process." "I filed under my maiden name," I said simply. "On legal advice." There was an audible gasp behind her. "Eleanor's, perhaps." "You tricked us," Neil growled in the background. "No," I said quietly. "I followed the law." "You followed greed." Their anger tumbled through the phone in overlapping accusations. Manipulative. Unfair. Dishonest. Cruel. Their words painted a portrait of me that existed only in their imagination. A portrait shaped by entitlement, not truth. When they finally paused for breath, I spoke with clarity. "I have a fully documented claim. I was Daniel's legal spouse for 36 years. His caregiver. His partner. His only next of kin. And I filed on time, appropriately, and in accordance with legal counsel. You, on the other hand, attempted to impersonate grieving relatives to seize something that was never yours. I have recordings, letters, evidence. And if you attempt one more act of harassment, I will ensure every authority involved is fully informed of your behavior." Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. For the first time in my life, I felt them recalibrate, not out of respect, but out of fear. I ended the call before they could recover. Later that night, the settlement office emailed me. "Your claim has been approved." It included the attachment, a confirmation of the $210,000 payout, scheduled for transfer. The truth had unfolded beautifully, elegantly, and without a single raised voice. And yet, I knew the confrontation itself still lay ahead. They wouldn't accept defeat quietly. But I was ready. The confrontation came sooner than I anticipated. 2 evenings after the approval email, as the autumn light faded and the street lamps flickered alive, I opened my front door to find my in-laws clustered together like a disgruntled committee. Neil stood with puffed-up shoulders. Loretta looked flushed with indignation. Eleanor's jaw was set in a rigid, angular line. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me, blocking access to the house. My voice was calm, deliberate. "This is not a good time." "We're not leaving," Neil said. "You owe us explanations. And compensation." I studied the 3 faces before me. Angry, frustrated, humiliated. Grief didn't exist anywhere in them. Only entitlement. "What exactly do you believe you're owed?" I asked. "Daniel was our family," Loretta snapped. "You can't just take everything. It isn't right." "Your brother left everything to me," I said gently. "Not because he didn't love you, but because he understood each of us for who we were." "You're twisting things," she said, but her voice faltered. "No," I replied. "I'm stating facts." I held up the folder. Inside were neatly organized documents. Dates, recordings, screenshots, the notarized will, and their lawyer's letter. You attempted to commit fraudulent claim filing, I said. You misrepresented your legal rights. You attempted to defame my character to government offices. You tried to weaponize grief to seize money connected to Daniel's suffering. Eleanor's nostrils flared. Watch your tone, she commanded, like I was still the meek daughter-in-law from 30 years ago. But that woman was long gone. My tone, I said, evenly and without emotion, is the tone of someone who is done being manipulated. I handed Neil the folder. Everything is documented. If you continue interfering, I will pursue legal action. You are welcome to take this to your attorney. I would be pleased to let them review your behavior. He opened the folder. His face paled at the contents. You tricked us, he muttered. No, I said. I protected myself from you. Loretta's eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the disbelief of someone finally forced to see their own reflection. You could have shared, she whispered. Shared what? I asked. Daniel's pain? His hospital bills? His sleepless nights? His fear of leaving me alone with debt? You didn't share any of that. No one spoke. Not even Eleanor. The stillness felt like a verdict delivered by the world itself. Finally, I ended it with a statement so clear, so final, that even they couldn't twist it. This money is compensation for the suffering your brother endured while you stayed distant. And it is legally, morally, and exclusively mine. You may leave. Slowly, stiffly, they backed away. Eleanor was the last to turn. For a moment, her eyes softened, as if she finally understood the truth she had avoided for decades. But understanding came too late. The fallout from the confrontation rippled through the family like a shockwave. Neil's lawyer sent a short, reluctant note formally withdrawing representation. Loretta posted passive-aggressive messages on social media about heartless widows, which only resulted in distant relatives messaging me privately to apologize on her behalf. Eleanor sent no messages at all. A week later, the settlement transferred into my account. I paid Daniel's final medical bills first. The rest went into savings, money I would use to secure the life he hoped I would live when he was no longer beside me. Then the most unexpected consequence arrived. A letter, handwritten, delivered quietly to my mailbox. It was from Eleanor. The script was shaky, old-fashioned, almost brittle. Evelyn, it began. I have lived long enough to know when I have failed. I failed your husband. I failed to see his goodness. I failed to show gratitude for the woman who stood by him when we did not. I confess we believed the money was owed to us because we are blood. But I see now that blood means nothing without loyalty. I paused, reading the words again slowly. I cannot change what has happened, the letter continued. Nor can I undo our behavior. But I hope, perhaps in time, you will accept this apology, not as an excuse, but as a final truth from a very old woman who has made more mistakes than she can bear. There was no manipulation in the letter. No demand. No blame. Just frail honesty. I folded it carefully and placed it in Daniel's memory box. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted revenge, but because some apologies are meant to stand alone, unanswered but acknowledged. As for Loretta and Neil, they kept their distance. Perhaps they feared legal consequences. Perhaps they feared facing themselves. Either way, peace returned to my home, not the fragile, uncertain peace that comes after tragedy, but a deeper, more grounded peace born from truth finally having its say. The consequences were not dramatic. No arrests, no lawsuits, no public scenes. Just accountability. And distance. And finally, silence. In the quiet weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on the nature of betrayal, and how it so often wears the face of family. I sat one evening on the porch Daniel built, watching the sun settle into the horizon, and I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt resolved. Grief and justice are strange companions. One tethers you to the past, the other frees you from it. Learning to live between them is its own kind of journey. Slow, steady, and profoundly human. I used part of the settlement to renovate our home, preserving Daniel's craftsmanship while making space for the life ahead of me. I donated a portion to a fund for workers harmed by chemical exposure. It felt right, like closing a loop, carrying forward a part of Daniel's legacy. My in-laws remained distant, their attempts at manipulation reduced to whispers that faded with time. In their absence, I discovered a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing for years. But the most important lesson was this. Revenge doesn't always require destruction. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is clarity, documentation, boundaries, truth spoken without fear, and the unshakable calm of knowing you acted with integrity. If you ever face people who try to rewrite your reality, remember this. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't need cruelty to win. You need truth, patience, and the courage to stand firm even when others underestimate you. Daniel once told me, "The truth always arrives, Evelyn. It may walk, but it never stops." He was right. And if my story reminds you of your own battles, with family, with betrayal, with justice, know that you are not alone. And you are stronger than you think. Before we close, I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever had someone try to take advantage of you during a vulnerable time? What did you learn from it? Your story matters. And I'm here to listen.